Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all listeners to the inaugural first recording of my podcast. My name is Lance Wines, and I think that I'm going to name this, at least for now, Late Nights with Lance. I do most of my best thinking at night when I'm alone and it's quiet and I can sort of ponder life's great questions, reflect on my own decisions, and come to conclusions that I can't really share with friends and family for a number of reasons. One of them being that they're not awake. I'm a night owl, so I figured I should do some recording at night, get these out there, and hopefully this gives people a chance to spend some time in thought and some time in reflection. Maybe gain a thing or two. If not, if no one listens, at least I got it out there, and that's what really matters. Um, I'm recording this using the Anchor site, that is anchor.fm. Allows you to make podcasts, record. They're not a sponsor, obviously, but I just wanted to give them a shout out. Uh, so I'll be using their website and flipping through that, learning as we go here. But yeah, so I figured I should give at least a brief introduction. My name is Lance Wines from Winchester, Virginia. I'm currently living at home, obviously during this global pandemic and my chronic unemployment. I'm a recent law school graduate. I took the Virginia State Bar back in July of 2020, and unfortunately, I did not pass. I found out in October that I did not pass. And so, with everything going on, luckily I had the opportunity to retake the Virginia Bar in February of 2021. So, I'm currently studying for that, sitting on my law degree, sitting on my bachelor's degree, studying for the bar exam at home. Um, what else about me? I'm a big pop culture fan. I love movies, television. I love music. Um, yeah, I'm very big into politics and law. That sort of comes with the territory, I guess. And I really wanted to make a podcast. I was inspired by Rhett and Link of Good Mythical Morning. Um, I've really enjoyed their videos and their content throughout the pandemic, throughout quarantine. So I figured, hey, they started out with nothing and look where they are. I might as well try my hand at it. And, I'd like to think that I have a lot to say. And, it may not be helpful or insightful for everyone, but if I've learned anything, it's that there's always someone out there going through something similar to what you're going through. So yeah, this is Late Nights with Lance, and we're about 3 minutes in. This will be 30-minute segments. I don't know how long I'm gonna last. That's what she said, but we'll see where it goes. So yeah, I guess I should start with what inspired me to make this podcast tonight. And we're going to be talking about the big stuff. This is one of those big stuff podcasts. So if you're looking for origami or sewing, this probably isn't for you. Um, but yeah, so New Year's is coming up, obviously. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. So we'll be saying goodbye to this terrible year, this god awful year, and welcoming in a new year, welcoming in the next step in this decade. And with that comes a lot of hope, a lot of inspiration. I think a lot of people are looking to sort of leave a lot of baggage behind in 2020. A lot of baggage they may have picked up in 2020. They're hoping to leave behind. Obviously, that's not the case for me necessarily. I have a lot of baggage that I've been holding on to for a while, and I'd like to unpack some of that and just sort of get that out there and see if other people um, share in any of these experiences or thoughts, feelings, emotions, and we'll see how it goes. So with New Year's Eve, I could talk about the welcoming of the new year and all that, but this isn't really about that. It's more about the celebration of the new year, and a lot of that is done, as a couple or as a group, and with some sort of human interaction and human intimacy at different levels, whether it be platonic or romantic. Um, and this year, a lot of people won't have that, myself included. Um, obviously, I feel like I'm saying obviously a lot, but these things are obvious. So the court should take record of this. Um, that there are millions of people around the world that will be ringing in this new year without their beloved, without their parents, their siblings, their grandparents, their aunts and uncles, their spouses, their significant others, their friends. I mean, there are millions of people around the world who will be ringing in 2021 with empty seats at the table because of this global pandemic, because of the poor management of the uh, global pandemic, and that's a real shame. And I don't want to necessarily compare my problems to these people, compare my issues with these people because they've suffered great loss, uh, preventable loss. Honestly, I mean, the United States has racked up a casualty total of somewhere close to 340,000, and they're saying that by the end of next year, it could be 400, maybe even 500,000 people. And this is on the cusp of introducing a vaccine, but it's still that deadly and that tragic. And so for those people, it's going to be difficult to celebrate. You're looking at the new year with hope and with aspirations and dreams, and hoping that we can set a lot of the past behind us. Um, but with that, may come the feeling of leaving some people behind as well. And I really, anyone who's listening who's lost someone this year, especially because of the coronavirus, I want to remind you that that's not the case. You're leaving the negativity, the bad thoughts, the bad memories, the baggage behind, but you're carrying those people that you love with you. And they may not be there physically in the worldly form, but they're there in your hearts and spiritually, and in the things that you do. And it's important to remember that they didn't lose the battle with coronavirus. You don't lose the battle with diseases. You win in the fight, and you win in how you live. Um, so yeah, so with that aspect, there are people who will be alone or will be suffering from that loneliness because of actual physical loss, dealing with mortality and things like that, and that's extremely difficult to imagine, especially the fact that we're in the millions affected. This is something that I don't think anyone really expected to happen in our lifetime, especially in this new millennia. But on the other side of that, people will be, going without and dealing with loneliness on the romantic side of things, and that's more um, where I'm coming to you tonight with this podcast. Is people are going to be dealing with the fact that for whatever reason they'll be celebrating the new year alone, and of course one of the most sacred traditions across the globe is to ring in the new year with a kiss, whether it be of a beloved, a spouse, a significant other, or in other cultures around the world, friends and family, kisses on the cheek, platonic, familiar, things like that. It doesn't have to be romantic, but specifically in Western culture and in the United States, it's typically seen as a romantic moment. And a number of films, you see it as a time when people even drop down on a knee and propose, which is kind of lazy because you're never going to forget your anniversary. You're never going to forget when you propose simply because it's the first day of the year. So that's kind of cheating, but I digress. And that's difficult, and this isn't the first New Year's that I've spent single, alone, without any romantic partner or significant other. Obviously, you spend, being 25 years old, you spend the majority of your life actually ringing the New Year single because you're, a child, adolescent, whatever. But talking about the dating age in particular, so from high school onward, yeah, I've had a few where I've been single. It's really nothing to shake a fist at. Um, but this year I think is different. I'm still dealing with the baggage and the loneliness that I've been carrying for the past few years. Uh, and with this year, there's not really even a chance for redemption necessarily. And what I mean by that is, you know, I've been dealing with my feelings regarding my last relationship, my previous relationship, and my ex, and still caring for that person, still wanting to be with that person, still having feelings for that person, but not being able to be with them. But it's my fault. Obviously, that's a whole other podcast. If any listener was interested in that, that's a whole other podcast. But it's completely my fault. I'm a dumbass. Uh, I am a genuine fuck up. Pardon my language. But I'm working on it, and so I have no one to blame but myself. Um, but that being said, eventually you have to pick yourself up, and that's what I've been working on the last going on 2 years is picking myself back up, and it's been hard. I mean, growth and healing aren't linear. There are ups and downs, there's peaks and valleys, there's ebbs and flows. And so sometimes, it looked like I was picking myself up, doing really well, feeling confident in myself, not really holding on to that baggage and those memories, not dwelling on the past and letting that pull me back. And then other times, I'll have a setback. Something will happen that will really, hurt my confidence, hurt my ego, remind me of where I am in the world. And I'll think, I think a lot of it comes down to, before I didn't feel this way. I didn't feel this way when I was with this person. This person didn't make me feel this way. I didn't experience these feelings of loss and regret and failure when I was with this person. Therefore, I miss this person because when I was with them, I wasn't experiencing these failures. I may have been experiencing other failures that I literally can't experience now because I'm single. Those failures could have been tied to having a relationship or being in that specific relationship, but because I'm single, I can't experience those failures. So the failures that I'm experiencing now on my own, as a result of my own merit, I say, well, these failures are terrible, and I have no one to blame but myself. But when I was with my ex girlfriend, when I was with my past significant other, I didn't have these failures. So you sort of make a connection in your mind that's not really based on logic. It's a fallacy that I was more successful when I was with them. So therefore, I miss them because I miss having that comfort zone, that safety net, and the ability to succeed without worrying about other issues. Because back then, the only issues that you really think about worrying about, the most pressing issues, at least for me, being an empath, is they're the issues in your relationship. So your romantic issues, your intimate issues, issues with communication, with providing, things like that. And in terms of your professional life, those things, you can do that with sort of the safety net, the backdrop that you have a relationship to turn to. So if I fail somehow professionally, at least I have this relationship that I've been working on that is at least successful or bringing me joy that I don't have to worry about. But when you don't have that and you just have the professional success, when you fail professionally and you don't have an intimate partner to back you up or to be there as sort of like a comfort zone or reassurance that you are successful at something, or can make someone happy if it's not yourself, when you don't have that and you're a professional failure, you just look like a failure. There's nothing else you can really say to that. And that's when you think, well, if I didn't feel this way with them, then they must be the cure to these feelings. That's sort of the statement that you make in your mind. It's like a dependent clause. Your feelings are dependent on this other person, just because of that illogical fallacy. And so you begin to miss that person. And, there's also the issue of, do you miss them because of those feelings, because of the things that you did, because of the things that you could enjoy with someone else, but because you haven't, you just miss that person? Or do you actually miss that person? Um, and that's something that you really have to battle with. that's really what it comes down to with growth and healing from a relationship, is learning where you've reached the point where in the beginning, typically, you think that you miss the person. You're like, hey, I spent years with this person. I know everything about them. They know everything about me. They're my better half. I miss them. And you miss everything that you did with them, like going out, you're taking drives, listening to music, making jokes about whatever, cooking. It doesn't matter. But then you get to a point where you become, in terms of time, maybe even space, but mostly time, temporarily distant from that person. So the further you get away from that person in terms of time, you find yourself missing those things. I still miss going for drives. Still miss listening to music, watching Saturday Night Live, doing all this stuff. You still miss the things, but then you have to realize it's almost been too long since I've done them with that person. That's probably not their company specifically that I'm missing. It's doing those things with someone to enjoy them with. And that's like the major step in healing from a relationship, is realizing, hey, it's not this person I'm missing, it's these things that I could do with someone else. And it's not cut and dry either. It's not clear cut, because you can go in and out of that. You could say, hey, with some things, it's not that I miss my ex, it's that I just miss doing the things with someone that I loved. And there was reciprocal love there, and friendship, and intimacy. And you're like, well, it doesn't matter who I'm doing it with, I just miss it. And a lot of that comes from, when you're depressed coming out of a relationship, you just don't do things. The perfect example is Eric Foreman on that '70s show. After him and Donna broke up, he just laid in bed and didn't want to hang out with the guys in the smoke circle. And, you just don't want to do things. And so when you finally sort of get over that, you're like, well, I miss it. And it's not because of the person, it's just because you didn't do anything because you were, sulking, which, guilty. But then the other aspect is sometimes you do something or you're reminded of something and it hits you that it was that person. And you think it could be, 99% of the things you realize you just miss doing them because you're healing, because you're becoming a better person again. And then that 1% hits you and it's like, man, this thing was specific to our relationship. This isn't something I can recreate with someone else, with a new partner, or with someone who isn't even a partner, someone who's just, a hookup or a friend or whatever. This is something that was specific to this person at this point in time, at our level of intimacy at that time. And that 1% hits like 99%. And that really sets you back. And, and then you start to question everything else again. And it's an evolution. It's more of a continuum, I think, than a linear slope of healing. Because you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be back to where you were before you met the person. And, you're never going to be at a point where, afterwards you're not shaped by them somehow, touched by them somehow. You can't go back, you can't turn back time. And you also can't ignore the repercussions of your choices. It's like the butterfly effect or whatever. So then not to go on that tangent, just to round it back out. Going back to New Year's, you start to think, well, do you just miss having someone to kiss at midnight? Do you miss, going out, having drinks, having fun with friends, going to different parties, in and out of bars, restaurants? Sometimes you just don't even go out, you watch a movie. And then at midnight, you're getting ready, you're getting antsy, you get your party hat on, you get your horn. I was going to make a horn noise, but you know what I mean? Do you miss that? And then you look at someone and you say, hey, Happy New Year. And then you kiss. And it could be like a platonic, awkward Jesus in the middle kiss, or it can be like a romantic, French kiss or whatever. Do you just miss that because you feel like that's fulfilling, that's satisfying, that is something that you've missed out on, that you need to feel better? Or do you miss this person and how you celebrated New Year's together. And, it's sort of, it, it hits you in a strange way. Which one is it? And usually the first holiday after a breakup, it can be that you miss the person because you're used to spending your previous holidays with them and you're not doing that this time. But like I said, as you go forward in time, there's sort of that bouncing back and forth between, is it because I miss them at this holiday, or is it because I miss celebrating this holiday with someone who likes me, who loves me? And that's where I'm at, and that's this for me. It's different than losing a loved one to a disease, to a preventable disease. I can't stress that enough. Because that wasn't your choice. That wasn't anyone's choice. I mean, you can go back and forth about the government and people who don't wear masks and people who don't social distance, but at the end of the day, that's just luck of the draw. That's the hand you're dealt, is a disease, and that's someone's choice. You didn't choose to lose there, and it's tragic, and you can't win them back, and they're gone. It's final. It's finite. It's definite. You know what I mean? It's conclusive. I miss this person, and I will always miss this person because it's finite. Because time is finite, and this is over. This is conclusive that they're gone. Versus choices and decisions and repercussions that lead to you being alone. That not only do you have to deal with being alone, you have to deal with the fact that you're responsible for that. And also the fact that you're responsible for picking yourself back up and responsible for finding a partner who you then are responsible for treating properly to prevent this from happening again. And that's the struggle that I'm in now. I could do a whole talk about losing a relative and how that feels. I lost my father back January 9th of 2020. So this will be my first New Year's without him. And this will be his first, in heaven. But that is uh, you know that is conclusive. That is not going to change. That's something that's over, and I have to deal with it. But with this relationship issues and being single and dealing with those feelings, those are things that you know I'll have my whole life to be sad about my father, to have regrets and remorse and feelings about my father. I'll have my entire life, whether that be one day or whether that be 5,000 days. I don't. That doesn't actually seem like a lot. Let's go with 50,000 days. Hopefully, I don't know. But you know what I mean. Whether I die tomorrow or die 50 years from now, I'll have my entire life to be sad about my father. But I can't spend the rest of my life in this shell of regret. I have to, like, I'm suffering now, but I can't suffer forever because that will hold me back from literally living. Like, there's no point in going on if I'm just going to spend the rest of my life being sad that I'm alone on New Year's and the reasons behind that. And that's when it's different because these things, these issues, you kind of have to, you got to saddle back up. You got to grab the reins and you got to make something happen. Um, and you can keep getting kicked off the horse, bucked off the Bronco, but you got to make something happen. And that's really where we are with this, and how I feel tonight, and how I'm going to deal with that. And that's we're about 24 minutes in, so we got a few more minutes of this session, and then I'll pick back up, obviously. But I guess where we're going is how I'm dealing with those things, and I do think that I'm still, even 2 years later, I'm still at a point where I think it's the person, it's not the feeling, it's not the thing. You know what I mean? Like, sure, it'd be cool if some beautiful woman came out of the blue, messaged me out of the blue, and said, "Hey, tomorrow night, on New Year's Eve, I'm gonna spend the evening with you. I want to go out." Well, we can't really go out. I forgot that. we're in a pandemic. But you know what I mean? Like if someone texts me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I want to come over, celebrate the new year with you. I want you to be my New Year's kiss and all that stuff." And I don't know why I've been holding on to that for so long. It's kind of a childish notion, but I'm a childish person. I'm a childish person. I can't even say it. I'm a I'm a childish person at heart. And so, those things are sappy and corny and immature, but they mean a lot to me because they're things I didn't have. Um, but yeah, if someone was like, "Hey, I want you to be my New Year's kiss and spend the holiday together," I'd be like, "Yeah, that's great." And part of that would be satisfied. Part of that would be satisfying, like 30 or 40% of it, maybe. But the other, 60 to 70% is the fact that the whole time I'd probably be thinking about someone else. And so, is it really like life isn't all or nothing? It's not black and white. There's plenty of shades of gray. There's plenty of in betweens. But with that, it would be wrong to accept the in between. People do it all the time. It's not, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, and that I would be an outlier for doing that. But I think it would be wrong to just sort of put in a place filler to be like, "Hey, I'm missing this person, and I wish that I could be with this person on New Year's, but I can't have them, so I'm going to settle for you. You're my consolation prize. Congratulations." That's terrible, and people do that. I've done that. I guess that's kind of what a rebound is. Um, to say, "Hey, I'm lonely. I'd like someone to talk to laugh with, to share stories, to share physical touch, physical intimacy, whether it be, holding hands or a kiss on the cheek to, kiss on the lips, a hug, so on and so forth." Um, but to just have it be a place filler or a person that is not really who you want, but it's just who's available to sort of fill part of your emotional void, that's wrong, and I've done that before, and obviously I have regrets and remorse about that, but I don't want to do that now. And coming to terms with that and the morality of that, along with the fact that because I come to terms with the morality of that, I'm back at square one. It feels like a lose lose. And we want like a win win win, as Michael Scott would say. But I don't think there's a win 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 in this situation. Um, there's more of a win win lose, I guess, in that I've protected my feelings and I've done what I think is right, and I've protected someone else's feelings by not taking advantage of them. But at the end of the day, I'm still sort of where I started. Um, and I have to keep building from that. But life isn't, concrete and cement. Life isn't, rebar and steel beams. Life is Jenga. It falls down sometimes. You laugh, you cry, you clean up the drink you spilled on yourself, and you keep going. You build the tower back up again. And then eventually you have to go to bed, and that you take a final good night. But life is like Jenga. You just keep rebuilding until you get it right, and things fall down. Sometimes the whole thing falls, sometimes just part of it, and you just go from there. But if you have a good team, a good partner, someone that you're playing with, it makes it fun. It makes it worthwhile. You can pick it up together. Uh, and I'm just tired of picking it up by myself. But I'm not going to just ask someone to pick up the pieces without having any benefit of playing the game. So with that, we're coming down to a minute. This was, the first session, first recording of Late Nights with Lance. Thank you if you've made it this far for listening. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that this spoke to you in some way. And we'll be back in a few moments. So thank you again. This is Lance Wines signing off for the first half of the first episode of Late Nights with Lance. Thank you.
Have you ever sat around listening to your favorite podcast and thought, well, they're just talking about nothing. I can talk about nothing. Why don't I do that? Well, here's your chance. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First and foremost, it's free to use and it's hours of fun. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your smartphone or computer. They then distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcast materials. You can make money from your podcast, and there's no minimum listenership. It's everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. We all need a creative outlet, and this is your opportunity to have your voice be heard. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.FM to get started. Hello, everyone. We're back for the second session of the first episode, the very first episode of Late Nights with Lance. I hope that you guys enjoyed the first 30 minutes. There'll probably be another 30-minute session, and then we'll probably call it a night, just for the first session, first recording. But yeah, let's get back to where we were. We're talking about New Year's and dealing with, your New Year's without someone, I guess, and how to deal with that. And, I can't lie. I've been a little down on the dumps, just dealing with everything that's been happening this year, dealing with the holiday season, especially, not only am I dealing with the holiday season without, someone, a romantic partner, an intimate partner, but also, without my father, and considering the fact that, without most of my family because of, being socially distanced and playing it safe in COVID, for the third or fourth wave that's coming up. And, it's hard to deal with all this loneliness and feeling. It's not just the loneliness, it's the isolation. It's not the heat, it's the humility, as Yogi Berra said. And all year, if you've been going through anything this year, if you've had anything build up or happen to you this year, you've more than likely had to deal with that alone in some way, shape, or form. You may be at home with parents, with a spouse, with children, with a roommate, or whatever your living situation is. But it's not the same as it would be in normal circumstance. So if we experienced all of the trials and tribulations that we experienced this year in any other year in, recent history, it'd be completely different, because you would just use your normal coping mechanisms and your normal resources and healing outlets, and you'd get over things. I don't get over things, but, most normal people get over things. But this year, if something happened to you in this instance, you have to learn to deal, to cope, to heal in a whole new sense, a whole new, way, whether it be a different venue, different environment, different people around you. Maybe you're trapped alone, as I would consider myself, in isolation, or maybe you're trapped with people and you want to be alone. That's sort of the other aspect of it too, is imagine, being someone who their love language is physical touch, or someone who is an extrovert, or someone who is, for some reason in some sort of isolation prior to quarantine, and now you're dealing with all of 2020 alone in this isolation, and there's no escape from it. And it's not like, hey, something hits you and I'm in isolation now, but I can escape to find company, to find shelter, to find friendship, companionship, camaraderie. You can't do that. But then on the other end, and the part that I think a lot of people ignore, or at least don't think about as much, is what if you're an introvert? What if you're someone who has social anxiety? Your social battery is drained. That's what happens. Your social battery becomes drained. You need to get away and isolate and recharge. And what if you're a parent, and you have a spouse or a co-parent in a house full of children, and you're working from home, you're doing telework, and you're worrying about, the health and well-being of your family, your friends that you can't see, and you're becoming overwhelmed, you're becoming anxious, you're becoming, you're sort of trapped, in this setting where you need isolation because you need time to be alone and to heal and to think on your own. with independence, but you can't because you're trapped in a house with all these people who all have, desires and demands that it's your responsibility to fulfill. If you're an introvert stuck in an extroverted situation for an entire year with no escape, that's just as mentally and emotionally damaging as it is being someone like me stuck in isolation, where I crave and yearn for human interaction and human intimacy. Other people may need to get away from that. And that's what this year has come to. It is at this point in the year, if you're still following the guidelines, if you're still being a good person, a decent human being, following the guidelines, playing it safe, wearing masks, social distancing, quarantining, all that good stuff, if you have been doing that all year, at this point in time, at the new year, you're in one of those two boats. You're either an extrovert or someone who craves intimacy, who is lacking that and who is yearning for that again. Someone who is begging to have someone come in their life, or you're an introvert who's been trapped in a house with a bunch of wild human beings, and you're at the point where you wish that things would open up and change so they can leave, so you can have the house to yourself. And you may be fine staying at home as long as you're home alone. And that's where we are in a society, and I think that's why a lot of tensions are high in other aspects of the United States social experiment. But anyway, back to New Year's. It's sort of, how do you deal with that, and what do you think about that? And of course, a lot of my issues with New Year's, as I just explained, is not because of the holiday. There's nothing inherently good or bad about New Year's. It's just a day. And considering that time is a social construct that doesn't exist, much like currency, it's literally just another day. It's another day that a few thousand years ago, people thought, hey, this is a specific day where the earth is at a certain point in regards to the sun. And in however many rotations later, 365 rotations later, we'll be in this exact same point again. And they chose this day for whatever reason. And they said, hey, in exactly 360, well, it's more 365 and 1/4 rotations later, we'll have made one revolution around the sun. That's a year. And this is today. And they just decided, and we gave it a name, January. That's it. And I think that it used to be on the solstice. This is more of like a factoid, I guess. I'm pretty sure that it used to be on what we consider the winter solstice. But because of Julius Caesar adding the month of July and adding the month of August for his cousin, Augustus, he wanted months that reflected the Caesar name. So Julius, July, and then, Augustus, August. That skewed it to the point where that's not how it worked out. Which, whatever. And plus, with the leap year thing and Benjamin Franklin creating the daylight savings, it's really altered the calendar. That's not the point. Anyway, back to where we were. It's just another day. It's not like, oh man, this is it. Michael Jackson, this is it. No, this is. I just miss the things that come with this day, come with the celebration, and I have to realize that those aren't make or break. It's not like if I have a good day tomorrow, it completely changes my outlook on life, and the outcome of tomorrow determines my success in 2021. If I have a good day tomorrow, it's going to be a good year, and if I have a bad day tomorrow, it's going to be a bad year, which inevitably that's what happened last year, but there were lots of unforeseen circumstances, such as the global pandemic, the economic recession, the loss of Kobe Bryant, Chadwick Boseman, John Lewis, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and the attempted coup by President Donald Trump. Those were all bad things that I could not have foreseen having a bad New Year's. But it's not like, I'm not, Puxatawny Lance. I'm not, it's not Groundhog Day. and I'm going to be experiencing the same bad day for an entire year. It's not like I see my shadow and I have a good year. So it really doesn't matter, and it's about me finding a way to overcome those emotions. Think them out logically and realize that, hey, it's okay to not be okay. All of these feelings that I'm experiencing, all of these thoughts, feelings, and emotions, whether it be missing a previous significant other, or dwelling on my loneliness, or being upset at myself for considering myself a failure, or dealing with the stresses of the world and all of these terrible global events. It's okay to be upset about those things, and I'm not the only one. I mean, there's no way that you're sitting at home and you feel alone. You feel the isolation and the lack of intimacy, human intimacy, not like sexual intimacy, but just interpersonal interaction. Meaningful interpersonal interaction is intimacy. And the lack of that makes you think that you're alone. And it makes you think that, oh, if I'm alone and I'm having these feelings, then these feelings must only happen to me because I'm alone. It's another fallacy, dependency fallacy. But that's not true. There's no way that you are sitting at home and you're the only one thinking, man, this world is crazy. Who would have thought that in this day and age of technology, we would be basically experiencing the plague in the dark ages, in the black ages. Like, who would think that in 2020 we would be back in the 1400s experiencing the black plague? And who would have thought that, well, I mean, a lot of people probably would have thought this, but who would have thought that trickle down economics would not work, and that we would continue on a almost I would say 3 to 4 year rotation, experience economic recessions that in the days of the gold standard in the 20s and 30s would be equal to the Great Depression. The recessions that we experience so commonly now as this generation, adjusting for inflation and adjusting for the fact that there's no backing of currency today, and that there's more capital in the world now than ever before. If this was the 20s and 30s, these almost every 4-year recessions since the housing market crisis would be equal to a Great Depression every 4 years. But we don't think about that because we have all these great advancements and technology, and the wealthy continue to gain super wealth, and they can do nothing for a whole year while the world is literally dying during a plague, and make $1 trillion while everyone's stuck at home. And that's why we have these recessions almost every 4 years, which whatever, you can make the argument about the exchange of power and things like that with presidential elections. But really, since the housing crisis bubble and the fiscal cliff, of that era of 2008, it's like every 4 years we're like, man, this economy is terrible. How can we stimulate it? Let's give the rich people more money. And then you get to 2020 and you're like, okay, but if we give the rich people more money and everyone else no money, they're literally going to starve. And you're like, whatever. And they keep doing the same old thing. Anyway, this is not the point. The point is, you look at this and you say, wow, we're living in, a plague, a global pandemic that's taken the lives of millions of people, affected the lives of millions of people, more casualties than combat casualties in the 2 world wars. We're looking at a global economic recession that is somehow hitting the United States harder than every other country for the first time in almost a century. Usually that doesn't happen because usually we can sort of displace the suffering to other countries. Like, it would hit us harder, but our leadership would be capable enough to say, hey, we will suffer the most, but we're going to push all that debt and all that suffering elsewhere. But because of our poor leadership, Donald Trump isn't smart enough to make it so that we suffer less. So we're basically experiencing, a Great Depression level economic recession. Obviously, we can talk about all the environmental issues, and you're saying, man, even if we survive this year, and even if we somehow make ends meet financially, there's no planet. What's the point? What's the point in surviving the pandemic? And what's the point in making a dollar if, myself or my children are the last generations of human beings because people keep destroying the planet? What's the point of that? You think, wow, that sucks. And you're stuck at home watching, the oceans die out filled with plastic, coral reefs die and bleach, forest fires ravage areas. You think, wow, this is terrible. How could it get any worse? And then, we're tired of this poor leadership, so we democratically elect a president, president-elect who we think is going to be some sort of, not necessarily a savior, but at least a cushion until we get our shit together. Stop the bleeding. And the current president who lost, who was responsible for all of the other issues, decides, hey, I don't want to leave office, and there's no precedent to stop a coup, so why don't we start one? And you say, well, I mean, he's right. There is no precedent here in the United States to prevent or to stop a coup d'etat because all of our leaders they may not have been good people, but they were decent enough people to respect the democratic process of our country and respect the Constitution and our, exchange of power, to respect the rule of law. And so, yeah, there is no precedent to prevent a coup because no one's been a dick enough to attempt one until now. And, we're dealing with that and we're saying, well, what's the point in surviving the pandemic, making ends meet, maybe preventing another forest fire, and starting to get 1 or 2% of the plastic out of the ocean if we're now living in a dictatorship and you're sitting at home alone, crying, eating, 3 quarts of Ben and Jerry's, late at night, wondering what's the purpose of life, what's the meaning of life, and you say, wow, I must be the only person who sees all these things. My life is terrible. I can't be the only one. There's no way. Because if I'm the only one that sees these things, I must be, Neo from the Matrix, or, Jesus Christ incarnate, or I'm just insane. And that's just not the case. But we feel alone. But there are thousands, if not millions of people across the country and around the world who are feeling the same way and who see these issues and respond in the same way. Because I think everyone in the world sees the issues that I've presented, but I think that because of their political beliefs or because of their emotional maturity and emotional capability, or lack thereof, they don't respond the same way. And it's not my problem. Those kinds of people. But just because they exist doesn't mean that the other people don't exist. And that's, really what it's come down to is, you're not alone. You're not the only person that feels that way. And that's important to realize. And it's something that you may have to tell yourself repeatedly, not just every day, but like multiple times a day. Like, hey, you're not alone. And you're not the first person to feel these things. You certainly won't be the last. It's not that you're not special, but, in this instance, you're not special. You're not the only one. And that feeling, with those grand, big scheme things, the grand scheme of things, that feeling translates directly to your emotional responses to personal things, to intimate things in your life. And you say, well, I'm the only person who must see that the world is on fire. And then it's like, well, I guess I'm the only person that feels sad and alone on New Year's. It translates because that's just how your mind works. It's kind of like a guilt torture mechanism. I'm not really sure of the purpose of it, though, but I think that it's there. And, you just have to keep fighting that. And you have to realize, that that's not the case. And you have to find an outlet, typically a creative outlet, to get rid of those feelings, or at least put all that pent up energy into something that may not be positive, but at least is healthy and not, damaging. So you make a podcast, I guess. Yeah, so I guess, you turn to a podcast. And like I said, to sort of bring this, full circle, it's hard to talk to people about these things. Even though there may be a million people, there may be billions of people on Earth that feel the same way. There's 8 billion people on the planet. You can assume that half of them are right and half of them are wrong, I guess. uh, and so, there could be, thousands, millions, billions of people on this planet that feel exactly like you do to at least something. You at least have one thing in common with, thousands, millions, billions of people, something in common. But it's hard to find that common ground. It's hard to talk to these people about these things, especially emotional issues, because people just don't like to be vulnerable. They feel like it makes them weak or it makes them weird, and that comes from socialization. That's just social norms. I've always been really vocal about my emotions, about my thoughts, my feelings, and I've always been one to step up and say what I think needed to be said, even if it wasn't popular and even if it caused conflict. And I like conflict. But I've ruined a lot of friendships and relationships. I've burned a lot of bridges that way, but I think that it was the right thing to do. And now, at the age of 25, I look at my peers, people my age, that I either went to high school with or to college with, and they're just now having these realizations and reacting and responding and acting emotionally in ways that I did when I was 16, 17 years old. And that's not to like toot my own horn or to say, oh, I'm more mature or more advanced. Because maybe they were more mature in saying that they didn't want to ruffle any feathers. They didn't want to burn any bridges. They wanted to survive. They wanted to fit in. They wanted to, grease the wheel, and they wanted to make it out alive without any scars or bumps or bruises. They wanted to make it out with as many friendships and connections as possible. And so maybe it's not that they didn't feel the way I did. Maybe they were more mature in the fact that they could pick their battles. But now, at this point in our life, when, we're 25, 26, in our mid-20s, looking at 30 dead in the eye, we realize that's not what's important. Or at least now that we are more settled and we're kind of, settling into where we're going to be, having those connections and those, superficial friendships, that's not what is important to our survival. What is important is standing up for yourself, standing up for your friends and family, being open and honest, and creating a life that you can, if not be proud of, at least not be insufferable. And so I see people responding and reacting in ways that I did when I was younger, when I lost a lot of friendships and, ended a lot of relationships and caused myself and other people a lot of emotional trauma. But now as adults, they do it, and maybe they have maturity that allows them to do it in better ways. But they're seeing now what I saw then, and it's that, superficial success and, facial success is nothing compared to being able to sleep at night. Being able to look yourself in the mirror, look yourself in the eye and say, I did the right thing. I stood up for what was right. I, stood up for someone or something, or I had a belief and I defended that belief. And, someone who wronged someone else, someone who hurt someone else, didn't get away with it, scot-free. They may not have got punished for it, but at least, let it be known that they did it, and let people know that that person did harm someone else. And, doing that when you're in high school, you have to see those people every day. You have to see those people literally every day from 7 o'clock until 4 o'clock, if not later. And so calling them out on their bullshit doesn't always help, especially when everyone has cliques and groups. And so you call one person out on their bullshit and you got 50 to 100 people mad at you for calling them out on the bullshit. But when you're an adult and you do it, You don't have to face that person every day. And so you go up to them and say, hey, you're wrong. You're treating someone poorly. You're doing the wrong thing. Sit on this information and know that everyone else thinks that the way that I do. And then you walk away and they have to sit on that. And they don't have, 50 to 100 people to say, hey, they're wrong. You're right. Don't listen to them. They don't have that anymore. And they actually have to deal with the repercussions of their decisions. And I don't know how I really got on this tangent. I'm sure that we can follow the line back. But basically it has to do with being okay with your feelings and being open with them. And people didn't talk about their feelings because they didn't want to cause a riff. People, especially because, you may not be emotionally mature enough in high school or in college to truly know what you're feeling and truly vocalize that and communicate that in a way that is clear and concise, but also comprehensible. And that's the key to emotional intelligence. Is it's not like taking a test. It's not studying. It's gaining experience, but you don't study it. It's in how you communicate it. And ever since you're younger, teachers will say you truly know something when you can teach it to someone else and they can understand it. You don't master material until you have the ability to explain it to someone else and teach them and they understand it correctly. And that's what emotional intelligence is. You're not emotionally intelligent until you can communicate your feelings in a way that other people can understand and comprehend. They can listen to actually comprehend, not just to respond. And then they can take that information and conceptualize it and manipulate it, and not manipulate as in change it, for malice, but, use it to formulate a response, an emotional response, and have an emotional, conversation, an emotional exchange that is mutually beneficial. It doesn't have to be positive. It can be negative. There are beneficial conversations that are negative, like most breakups, I guess. But it has to be beneficial in some way, and it has to be understood. There has to be a mutual understanding and a mutual benefit. But you have to be able to communicate your feelings in a way that they actually understand what you're actually feeling. And maybe in high school and in college, you can't do that. And maybe, just maybe, it's because you don't even know what you're feeling. Who's to say that, feelings that we have and names that we have for feelings accurately describe what we're feeling. But now, you talk about the loneliness, and that's what this is talking about those feelings. And, if I can get anything out of this podcast, and if you can get anything out of this podcast, it's that it's okay to not be okay. It is, it sucks. It's uncomfortable. It's not sexy. No one's ever going to be like, damn, look at that guy. He's got some rock hard problems. He's oozing conflict. You know what I mean? Like, it's not sexy, but it's real. And, just being able to talk about that and to talk about this has really made me feel better tonight. And I think that, it's a good groundwork for wherever this podcast is going to go. So, we're at 28 minutes in. I could speak for the rest of my life, but I don't think I have another 30 minutes regarding this topic unless I got, too personal and too detailed. But, I just wanted to end with this. I saw a quote online and I thought it was really interesting. It said, hold on, I got a notification because, of course, when I use my phone, I get a notification. Quote said, someday your children are going to figure out who you are, just like you figured out who your parents are as people. Be sure you're being that person they will be proud of when they figure you out. And that's true. It's about learning things you need to know, unlearning things that are unhealthy, and becoming a better person so that the interactions you have with other people are positive, or at least beneficial. So, thank you all for listening. I hope that you enjoyed this in some way. I hope that you tune back in whenever I make another podcast. But this is Lance Wines. I guess signing. I don't really have like a closer. I don't have any closure at all. Haha. But I don't have any closer. So this is Lance Wines signing off. This is Late Nights with Lance, and I hope to see you around. Remember, be good, do good, leave only your footprints. Thank you.